Destiny 2's most recent expansion, The Edge of Fate, has been out for a little while now and is the glaring definition of a mixed bag. There's a lot of good changes made to the core experience while simultaneously making changes to make said core experience worse. But first, let's go over the campaign because it's surprisingly decent. Going into this expansion, I was not expecting much from the campaign. It was supposed to be a non-linear campaign where you had multiple storylines you could choose at any point, going back to the usual open world format of the destinations. I didn't really like this direction because I thought the final shape nailed the formula and defined what a campaign quest should be for this game, but it was foolish of me to expect Bungie to iterate on an idea. Although I am happy to say the campaign did turn out quite good, even if it wasn't as non-linear as they promised. The format is very basic. You start with one quest, it splits into two, then converges back into one quest that takes you into the final part of the campaign. The actual missions themselves are in line with the previous years, falling somewhere between Witch Queen and Lightfall for me, although the campaign does have some undeniable baggage to say the least. Kepler is a special location because it has abilities that can only be used on the planet. The first one is Matter Spark. Oh, Matter Spark, you complicated ball of arc energy. This ability felt like it was half of the marketing for the DLC, acting like it's some revolutionary concept that's going to change the way we live our lives, giving it the same treatment as a new subclass. However, upon actually using the ability, it's not anything noteworthy. In fact, it feels more like the level designers forgot how to make fun worlds and instead just built the entire destination around Matterspark. You will use Matterspark at every twist, turn, nook, and cranny of Kepler. I don't think the ability is that offensive, assuming you can get past his borderline epileptic camera and stranger controls, but for the first half of the campaign where it's the only special ability you have, it gets real old real quick. It's used in every encounter, every platforming section, and every boss arena. Actually, speaking of, this is the most formulaic a campaign has ever been in this game. Every mission is damn near the same format. Enter a combat room, do a Matterspark puzzle, enter a platforming section where you'll eventually use Matterspark again, rinse repeat till you get to a boss. And some missions make you fight two bosses, meaning you go through the cycle again. By the way, did I mention Matterspark? Please tell me you got the part where I mentioned Matterspark. I really hope I remembered to mention Matterspark. Is this big getting on your nerves yet? Because that's how the first half of the campaign feels. It's not horrible by any means, but the over-reliance on Matterspark in very predictable format really dampens the experience. Sadly, it only gets marginally better in the second half. Mattermorph is the second ability, and I think it's used really well, but maybe that's because it's used as a complementary mechanic instead of the main crutch of the level design. Instead of turning to a ball that alters your gameplay mechanics, your melee is replaced with a strand melee that can fix certain parts of the environment, and again, I think it's a really cool idea. A bit limited since you get it so late into the campaign, but maybe that's for the better. The melee itself is also just really good against regular enemies, being an on-demand spend that recharges almost instantly. The final Kepler gimmick is the relocator cannon, which I don't really have much to say about. It's basically a portal gun with a couple extra steps, and it's neat. Not used as much as the previous abilities, but it's neat. Shame the projectile just doesn't want to shoot straight sometimes. It's just still a shame that Kepler is so over-reliant on these gimmicks to build the entire world. Like, yes, the other destinations had gimmicks, but they didn't feel this prevalent. I feel bad harping on this point as much as I have, but I really can't be overstated how much I dislike this direction for the game. The story is fairly good too. It starts with a train that crashes somewhere in Old Chicago and, upon inspection, is a call from the 9 to visit Kepler. Upon entering the train, we meet Lodi, who I did not expect to like as much as I did, and explains that the singularity that holds Kepler together is unstable and would destroy the entire solar system if it ever collapsed. So we're tasked with finding strangelets to stabilize it. Along the way, we learn about the factions on Kepler, the House of Exile and Maya's Vex, who are both battling for control of the singularity. We also learn of Lodi and Ikora's past, that they used to work together and how Lodi got sucked into the future through a phone, and that the Nine sent a train to kill Ikora so her body would be in the place where she resurrected. And I'm sorry, I know this is supposed to be a serious segment, but the train was such a jump scare in my first playthrough, I started crying from how hard I was laughing. It's just too funny of a premise. fucking way. There's no way.
That's how Ikora died.
That's how she
Her first
died?
death.
She just got. The nine was like, yeah, fuck that lady, and just hit her with the fucking train.
They hit her with the train from nowhere.
Regaining my composure, we also get to work with Orin, who is the former emissary that we've interacted with for the past 8 years. She's a pretty neat character who I hope we see more of. Afterwards, we head to the Singularity, where we find the Singularity is actually 3's dead body. We secure the route, and Drifter sends the hull into 3, reviving it, and it begins to speak through Lodi, warning us it will die again and cause a chain reaction that will wipe out the universe. During this, Maya attempts to absorb 3's power but fails, with 3 dying again and neutralizing the Singularity. Lodi then takes on the role of the emissary. I really enjoyed this story, more than I probably thought I would initially. It was neat getting to see Ikora's pre-Guardian life and meeting a character that is literally just some guy. The amount of missions here are nearly doubled from previous year's campaign, totaling 14 missions, half of which are just Matterspark the mission, but I already spoke my grievances with that earlier. The NPCs you encounter are pretty neat, with them even sporting a new dialogue screen, more reminiscent of a traditional RPG. In terms of aesthetics, the weapons and armor are pretty cool looking. The cutscenes have also had a massive increase in presentation and quality, somehow managing to be a step up from the final shape. It's a little surreal going from the lifelike cutscenes to the in-game visuals. Not a bad thing necessarily, just weird. The overall difficulty of the Legend campaign was fine, nothing too remarkable. Fabled and especially Mythic world tiers just feel pretty unfun, especially their world quests. There's a fair amount of side quests that open up post-campaign, but they're just doing more Matterspark puzzles, so I don't really care about doing them, especially since I don't think there's any incentive besides getting more lore. The destination itself, however, is boring. Coming off the heels of the very beloved Pale Heart, expectations were high for Kepler, and it falls flat in every single regard. You remember that ship we saw at the very beginning of the campaign? Sparks intrigue and wonder, causing you to wonder if it's relevant to anything happening here. Turns out, no. It's just cool set dressing. Now, this isn't a super uncommon thing, especially for this game, but to not only feature it a fair amount in marketing, but for it to be a centerpiece of the very first cutscene you see feels like lost potential. Leading up to launch, I wanted to explore it, since it'd be a unique set piece for a level, but sadly they don't do anything with it. Again, having interesting set dressing is a completely normal thing. The problem is that the destinations never really focus so much on a set piece you never get to explore. Think back to the first mission of Beyond Light, landing down on Europa and seeing the pyramid standing there on the horizon line. While the pyramid itself wouldn't be used as actual level design until the next campaign, we still interacted with it. It was still relevant. Even Witch Queen had something like this, with the giant bowl hanging over the horizon after you step foot into the throne world, or the pyramid ship over the horizon that would eventually house the raid, or the monolith's constant presence in the Pale Heart being used for the raid. It feels silly to harp on this point for so long, but it's only the beginning of my problems with Kepler, because unlike other destinations, there's not really any interesting background structures. Something I've always done in the other destinations is just wander around with no HUD, admiring the beautiful worlds this team has always excelled at crafting. Europa in particular still captures that feeling the best, but other recent destinations haven't really failed me to this degree. I never felt any of those emotions roaming through Kepler. I never stopped to smell the roses, to look around at the environment until the very end of the campaign, where the coolest backdrop in the entire destination is. I was a little speechless when I got here, just wanting to admire the beauty of it all. Moving on to the areas you actually get to explore, these are some of the most uninterested I've felt in an environment in years. Granted, it's hard to try to appreciate the world when I'm in a ball for 90% of the campaign, but overall, I'm just not a fan of the world aesthetic. The Ionian stuff is actually fairly neat and probably the biggest saving grace for me. However, I'm not the biggest fan of whatever the hell this is. It just isn't very appealing to me. Not much else I can critique here. Finally, something nobody in the world probably noticed, but there's also no matchmaking in the world here, much like Pale Heart. Now, for that destination, I can kind of understand why they ditched matchmaking until the campaign was finished, but here, the only reason I can think of is something with the world tiers may be complicating things, but it's still disappointing. It's such a small part of the game that nobody really appreciates, but it's the little things that can help the game feel more alive. Okay, did not intend for that rant to go on for that long. Let's move on to the exotics now. For weapons, we have New Land Beyond, the pre-order bonus. It's just no Land Beyond again, but with a far more powerful version of Precision Instrument. To be completely honest, I do not care for this weapon. The entire point of it in D1 was that it's a sniper in the primary slot, but we've been able to do that in this game for years, so for it to return is strange. It has the same clunky rechamber animation that while you can cancel, just doesn't really feel that great to play with. It's a really good weapon for DPS if you can make a lot of ammo, but I have other options I'd rather use. For the Season Pass, we got 3rd Iteration, a scout rifle that fires a spread of bullets normally, but can be aimed down sights to tighten the spread into one shot that marks them. You do increase damage to marked targets, and upon defeating them, you gain true sight and invisibility, which is pretty handy. It did have a really funny bug at launch whereby equipping anti-barrier scout rifle, this weapon did 3 times the damage, but sadly it did get patched the week after launch. My main issue with this weapon is the reload just doesn't really feel that great, and while loader mods do help with it, it's still a bit strange. The final exotic that I can review is Graviton Spike, which is probably my favorite of the bunch. The default fire is a 150 arc hand cannon, but after hitting 3 precision hits, it overcharges the alternate fire, where it turns into a 110 stasis hand cannon. Hitting 3 precision hits with the stasis mode overcharges the arc mode, where the arc mode will call down lightning strikes on precision hits, and the stasis mode will create a bunch of crystals. I don't really have a complaint with this. It's a really neat concept, but I wish the overcharges lasted more than 3 shots. There's an exotic from the raid, but I don't have it yet, so I can't really review it. But I've been told it's similar to the fuel rod from Halo, which sounds really badass. For armor, we only got 1 armor per class this round, which is really disappointing. For warlocks, we got Euonia, if that's even how you say that, which is pretty much useless. It basically gives healing full court and shoots out more projectiles, but these projectiles don't track and miss their target 99% of the time. Add on the fact that healing already lacks subclass synergy, and this exotic is just complete garbage. Titans get Melis Panoplia, which allows you to recall your hammer if you pick up a fire sprite or get rapid solar kills. It's a neat idea, but having to forego your exotic slot just to recall your hammer, especially when we've been begging for a hammer recall for years, is just lame. Finally, Hunters get Moirai, which allows your threaded spike to detonate tangles and also reweave them, meaning you get 2 tangles for the price of 1. Combined with Whirling Maelstrom, and it's very good. We also got some new weapon archetypes, which, much like the previous expansion, are really fun to mess with. They introduced a high-impact longbow, which comes with over-penetrating arrows, and it's pretty solid. We got a hand cannon that fires like a shotgun, and it's honestly one of the most new fun weapons I've played with so far. I absolutely adore this thing. Finally, we got a rocket pulse rifle, which actually might be the most fun weapon they've introduced in this expansion. It fires just like a pulse rifle, but instead of bullets, it fires rockets, and it's just as fun and powerful as the rocket sidearms are. The raid even introduces a new heavy weapon in the crossbow, which I sadly haven't obtained yet, but looks pretty fun. Speaking of the raid, let's talk about it. I'm aware there's a cheating scandal around this raid, and that does suck, but judging the raid for what it is, this is up there with Salvation's Edge. Sadly, much like Salvation's Edge, I can see this raid being pretty hard to LFG for in a couple months since it's a lot harder than a usual raid. Shame, because what is here is really good. We have a non-linear progression system, meaning you can choose the encounter order, very close to what the original Leviathan raid offered back in year 1. The raid has no puzzle encounters, instead it's a gauntlet of 4 bosses, all with their own mechanics. The Hydra boss has you reading eyes to your partner and having a really unique DPS phase where 2 people will randomly get chosen and you have to break the shield in order to extend the phase. The boss is also immune if you aren't in the shield's light, meaning everyone has to be prepared, and I really like that. Although this encounter does suffer from having one room being significantly harder than the other, which is just weird. The Wyvern boss has people shooting boxes and pillars and a person climbing up some platforms that get generated from these boxes being destroyed, as well as having people run chronons into the hourglass to stop a wipe from happening. It's a really easy encounter, but it's a very hectic one. The boss is super annoying to deal with, and sometimes the minotaurs you need to kill can just randomly despawn, making the encounter's timer really rough to deal with. The Hobgoblin encounter introduces the temporality buffs, which there are 3 types of. The boss will make one of the players with the temporality buffs align to the portals, and the other 2 need to call out what portals need to be activated. Then during DPS, one player, which isn't chosen at random for some reason, needs to run through the portals again to parry the boss's shot to extend the damage phase. Finally, the final boss combines most of these mechanics into one fight, and it's really good. You have the temporality buffs, which have their own roles. Absolute needs to call out the portal color and shoot the correct mine. Constant has to stun the boss and call out the color of the mines, and cyclical players need to verify if that mine being called out is glowing and deposit the chronon to continue the fight. Typically, the setup is to have 4 people on constant, 3 of whom will dedicate their entire world to killing ads and stunning the boss, and 1 person on each of the other buffs. After 6 chronons are deposited, you can climb up the boss and start the pre-DPS phase, where 1 constant and cyclical player needs to stand where a cube is not present, and the absolute player will interact with the cube that is not being stood at. Finally, DPS will start, and 1 player needs to deposit chronons into the hoop to extend DPS, while the rest of the team does damage. You do need to be wary of the boss's laser during DPS, but slap on 3 arc resists and you'll be fine as long as you're in a well. Last stand is pretty much the same, but after the boss's death you need to jump off, and that's the raid. It's a really fun raid that I hope doesn't die off in a couple months, especially because of the feat system. It's basically allowing you to place modifiers on the raid to increase the tier of your loot, and it's pretty fun. However, the fact that in order to even get half-decent loot from the raid you need to do these feats kinda kills my motivation. Watching people in contest mode get tier 1 drops did not boost my confidence at all. The environment around the raid is also really well designed, with each area being completely unique from each other, ending with the twist that the final boss has been a part of the central hub you've been running around was really unique, and something I kinda hope we see again. Finally, the weapons and armor are some of the coolest to come out of a raid. While my preferences still lie with Salvation's Edge or Vow of the Disciple, this is up there with those raids. And that about wraps it up for the expansion itself. While it may have more missions than previous expansions, none of them really stood out to me, and not counting 3rd iteration, which is the seasonal weapon, and New Land Beyond, since it's a pre-order, we only have 2 exotics to chase in this DLC, with one being a quest and the other locked behind the raid. Not to mention only having 1 exotic armor piece per class. It's a bit disappointing, but maybe the mid-season update will add more, since it also seems to be adding a new season pass, but only time will tell. Fortunately, this expansion also brought some massive changes to the core gameplay that I have yet to talk about, so let's get to it. The portal is a new interface that is supposed to be a quick and dirty way to just hop into the game, get some focus loot that rotates daily, and the new way to power grind. It's a pretty inoffensive addition. In fact, I'd argue it's a good addition despite the outcry from the community because it streamlines the actual power grind experience. It's split into 4 categories: Solo, Fireteam, Pinnacle, and Crucible. It also allows for full customization of the difficulty, with the power level of the rewards being dependent on your final score, to a max of dropping +4 power items until power 300, which only drops +3. However, this comes with its own problems. Not only is a lot of legacy content missing from the portal, raids, dungeons, and older seasonal activities, just to name a few, there's not much new content here either. While I think it's a good idea to revitalize old content and give us a reason to run it, it has to be balanced out with completely new content as well, and that just wasn't done here. They also replaced GM Nightfalls with conquests, which are limited to having 6 and only being completable once per season. This is such a backwards change because GM farming was a really fun thing to do near the end of a season, so to see nothing like that now is really strange. Another issue people had with the portal was its original intent to flat out replace the director. Now, this has been backpedaled, with Bungie claiming to revert the desaturation of the director and continue to update it over time, which is yet to be implemented as of recording. However, given that internal playtesters found this change confusing, I gotta wonder why it even shipped in the first place. I understand that the developers have a vision for this game, but if your vision is so confusing that your internal playtesters don't understand it, maybe it's time to budge a little. The amount of confusion I saw people endure over the portal/director system is something I've never seen in this game. The portal itself is super easy to understand, but it's the placement and presentation of it that I think confuse people. To reiterate, the portal itself isn't the problem, it's the implementation of it. The portal is the power grind now. Anything outside of the portal is essentially meaningless for power, which, coupled with the lack of legacy content, hurts the system even further. Sure, in 6 months, I'm sure Bungie will have softened up and this system will be a lot better, but I'm not making this video 6 months in the future. As it stands, the power grind is the most monotonous it's ever been, and even lonely at times. The most efficient power grinding method is solo ops, and I just can't bring myself to grind that out all the time. It's boring and unfun, just grinding out activities by yourself. Isn't this supposed to be a social game? Why are group activities not giving out comparable rewards compared to just grinding the same lost sector for hours on end? I'm not calling for solo ops to be nerfed. I think it's a good thing to have a rewarding solo experience, but the group activities need to give more loot. There's zero reason for Bungie to be this stingy with loot all the time. Also, why does it feel like the modifiers that get put on matchmade activities are always handpicked to be the worst? Like, yeah, I get the modifiers aren't always going to be favorable, but it feels like every activity just has the same 3 awful modifiers that are always on. Grappler is not a positive modifier, and you cannot convince me otherwise. It's similar to the low gravity modifier, where I think it's really fun on lower difficulties, but the higher difficulty you go, the more annoying it becomes. They also brought back match game as a modifier, which, like, why? Yeah, you can customize solo and pinnacle ops, so there you can avoid the awful modifiers, but for matchmade stuff, you can't unless you want to use Fireteam Finder all the time, which I don't. I don't want to be a person that wants Bungie to remove all the negative things because we aim too hard, but most of the negative modifiers are perfectly fine. There's just a couple that are straight up unfun, including Grappler, because you're not convincing me that it's positive in any way. Like, if they allowed it to have the melee be fine, especially given the heavy-handed nerfs it just received, but it doesn't, so I have to ask what the point of it is outside of just completely getting rid of grenade builds. This update also overhauled all of the armor stats, replacing mobility, resilience, and recovery with health, weapons, and class. Discipline, strength, and intellect still exist, but were renamed to grenade, melee, and super to improve readability. Every single stat point now matters, instead of following the tier system of the previous incarnation. They also increased the stat caps to 200, with 1 to 100 and 101 to 200 having different effects, a really good change. Health increases the amount of health you get for picking up an orb and flinch resist, and past 100 it makes your shields recharge faster and gain more health. Melee reduces your cooldown and makes you gain more melee energy from all sources, and past 100 it makes your melee do more damage. Grenade and super do the same thing. Class does the same thing, but after 100 it gives you an overshield when you use your class ability. Finally, weapons increase your weapons handling, reload, and damage, and past 100 it makes ammo bricks have a chance to give more ammo as well as further increasing weapon damage. These are very welcome changes as they all feel pretty useful, although for some reason in the subclass screen they removed the cooldown timers, which is a really weird change. Hell, the super stat doesn't even tell you the cooldown of your super anymore, which is just bizarre. The only stat I really view as not that great would be the class stat, but even that can be useful with the right builds, not to mention every stat point matters, even if only a little bit. They also changed the way armor stats are distributed, with them reintroducing the archetypes from year 1. Each archetype has one primary stat, one secondary, and a random third stat. I think the system is actually pretty great, if it wasn't for the fact that we only have 6 total archetypes right now, meaning if you farmed certain armor rolls before the expansion, you'd essentially have armor with illegal stat rolls, like weapon and super for example. The sad part is I totally know Bungie's going to introduce more archetypes in order to draw people back into the grind. I do like the archetype system because it makes armor way more deterministic, but it's just far too limiting with the archetypes we have available. And they also overhauled how ammo works, adding a little ammo bar to the bottom of the weapon UI, and while I like this shift to more deterministic ammo drops, I think they took a few steps back. They nerfed the amount of ammo you get per brick and also removed scout mods, which only adds on to the very anti-group design philosophy this game keeps pushing. You're constantly fighting for kills not only to make your abilities work, but now kills also impact your ammo economy. Assists don't do anything either, meaning someone can swoop in and steal your kill at the last second and you'll get nothing for it. Adding scout mods back in would help out, as well as assists giving a little bit of meter. Despite these shortcomings, the system is really good and definitely my preference to random ammo drops. This update saw the addition of a tier system to legendary drops, and this is the single most time-wasting part of this update. Notice how during the section on the portal I very deliberately avoided using the term tier, because the portal can only drop the tier of items your power bracket allows. The tier system goes to 5, and in order to get higher tier drops, you have to power grind. 10 to 200 will primarily get you tier 1s, 2 to 300 will be tier 2s, 300 to 400 will be tier 3s, and 400 onwards will drop tier 4 and 5. However, starting around 300, you can start randomly getting tier 4 drops, with me getting quite a few on my climb to 350. It's not based on the difficulty of the activity like it should be, instead it's locked behind the power grind, which, as mentioned prior, is so boring. It's never been a fun part of the game, and the fact Bungie wants to reset this grind every 6 months is just completely demoralizing. I get they want players to use new gear, but fully resetting our power to 200 every expansion means we'll be earning tier 2 gear, which is barely better than the gear from the previous system. I've also read that tier 5s are really rare, which, while I understand why, those also being the only way to level past 400 is just ridiculous. I like that we're de-emphasizing getting max power, as it's largely pointless with all the power caps put in place, but this just screams way too grindy with how monotonous the grind has become. I think if they just lowered the power cap and upgraded your loot tier every 50 power, that'd work so much better than the slogfest we currently have. Ideally, the difficulty of the activity would dictate our tier level, but that clearly isn't happening anytime soon. Okay, now with the negative out of the way, what is the actual benefit of higher tier loot? Starting with weapons, tier 1s are your standard issue weapons with no enhanced perks. Tier 2 enhances the perks. Tier 3 gives double enhanced perks. Tier 4 enhances the mods, magazine, and barrels, and finally, Tier 5 enhances the origin trait and gives a unique ornament and hollow chip. At first, I wasn't really a big fan of the system, but after getting my hands on a few Tier 5 weapons, I can safely say I've fallen for the bait. To be fair, a lot of my previous stance still stands. I haven't found most enhanced perks to be truly worth the cost of crafting them, but now that they come free, I guess it's not so bad. For me, the real treat of obtaining tier 5 weapons is getting those triple perk drops. I thought the double perks of tier 3 would be enough for my little goblin brain, but seeing a tier 5 weapon scratches an itch I didn't think I had. But what about armor? Before getting into that though, armor finally has set bonuses, which we haven't seen since Gambit Prime in 2019. Wow, just saying that sentence made some of my hairs turn gray. The tier system for armor dictates how many total stats it can receive, with tier 1 being 52 to 57, tier 2 being 58 to 63, tier 3 being 64 to 69, tier 4 being 70 to 75, as well as giving another energy slot, and tier 5 always being 75 and allowing stat tuning. Stat tuning allows you to either give 5 points to one stat while taking away 5 from another, or boost the lowest 3 stats by 1. They changed Armor Master Working to also boost the lowest 3 stat by 1 up to 5 times. Armor also has all 10 energy slots unlocked by default, which is really nice. They capped exotics to be tier 2 though, which I don't really agree with, but oh well. This system also replaces crafting entirely, which is sad to see, but kind of expected how much they've cut back on craftables the previous year. I also never really agreed with enhanced perks being able to be applied to any weapon, as I really like that they gave crafted weapons an edge above normal weapons, but seeing that they're dropping like candy, I hope Bungie can buff enhanced perks to make them more desirable. Also, speaking of, they changed the perk description UI a bit to specifically highlight what the enhanced perk does, and while this is a good thing, it is of course inconsistent. Take incandescent for example. What does this mean? This could mean literally anything in the world. It's not just incandescent, but most of them are fairly straightforward, so why are we continuing to be vague and inconsistent about it? Truly a baffling decision. As if resetting the power grind wasn't enough of a burn, they also introduced the new gear system, which gives you bonuses for using gear with this ugly blue watermark on it. This ranges from damage to damage resistance, and this system just doesn't do anything for me. For armor, it doesn't really bother me for now, since all my armor will eventually be tier 4 and 5, which of course is only possible with the new gear system. For weapons, it's mildly annoying because most weapons nowadays don't truly excite me. Maybe a few drops here and there, like my ever-beloved Luna's Howl and the new Rocket Boss as examples, but most of my weapon acquisitions of the past few years have just been to cover potential builds I may want to make. The part that really annoys me are the exotics are also being subjected to this system. Now yes, I think the new gear system is easy enough to avoid if you really want to, as nothing requires it except the optional modifier, but them trying so hard to funnel you into certain builds, especially when so many exotics are lacking in power, doesn't sit right with me. I get they've been going down this path for years now, but trying to essentially power creep select loot to push people out of their comfort zones is wild. I don't really know what they could do to remedy this system, given that I don't see them really reverting it anytime soon, but as I said, it's easy enough to avoid, so I wouldn't stress super hard over this system. They also finally allowed buffs to occupy the right side of the screen, but surprise surprise, it only hosts buff related to portal activities, and they still haven't increased the buff channel limit, meaning you can only see 4 at a time. I'm also fairly certain the dev team forgets that they have buffs channels at the top of the screen they can use, because there's some buffs that really need to be moved up there instead of being pinned to the top of your left buff channel. At least make these special pin buffs their own slot instead of taking up one of your valuable slots. Finally, I want to talk about Sandbox changes, because I am not a big fan of a lot of the changes made recently. First off, a lot of changes, specifically to Warlock, weren't even documented in the patch notes. On top of that, a lot of the Warlock toolkit got blindly nerfed while Titans and Hunters were eating good with changes and buffs to their kits. This isn't Subclass 2.0 anymore. Warlocks aren't this super dominant class anymore. They've nerfed everything we used to have and gave the rest away to the other classes. I thought I was crazy during 3.0's rollout, but no, they've really just been worsening the Warlock to the benefit of the other two classes. Not to mention the complete shift in our class identity to the Buddy class, when the Buddies have little to no subclass synergy. They also want to funnel us into Well so bad, but then decide to nerf everything surrounding the Well, meaning we're just the Well class and nothing else. It's getting super tiring to see Titan Hunter getting all these godly builds, and Warlock just gets more buddies until someone finds a build that's a fraction of the power of the other two classes, just for it to get nerfed into the ground at the next major update. I don't think buddies are inherently the problem, it's just their lack of synergy, and also them being the only way Bungie knows how to add onto the Warlock kit. I can't really speak for the other classes as I don't play them nearly as much, but reading the patch notes I also noticed a lot of nerfs that really don't make too much sense to me, but as mentioned, I barely play anything outside of my Warlock. Secondly, most primary weapons feel like I'm shooting wet noodles at my enemies on anything above master difficulty, leading me to resort to special ammo to do basic ad clear, leading to me having 0 ammo all the time. Enemies are far too bullet spongy, and I'm scared that the few weapons that can do good, most notably Outbreak Perfected, are on the chopping block, since I know Bungie loves to nerf things based on usage and not actual power. I hope they meaningfully buff primary soon, but I'm not holding my breath. Overall, Edge of Fate brought some well-needed updates to the game, but on top of breaking a lot of things, also brought some of the worst baggage one of these expansions has brought in a long while. The game isn't in the worst state it's ever been in, contrary to the popular opinion, but things could always be better, and all we can do is hope Bungie actually iterates on these ideas instead of spending all this time reworking them just to leave them in the dust. My only hope for future updates/expansions is that they keep fleshing out the core systems while adding enough new content. I don't really know if I'll make another video on Ash and Iron, or even Renegades. We'll see how significant they are and how much they change my opinion. But for now, I'd like to thank you all for watching, stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.